This is Dr. Jose Saldivar with the First Year Experience podcast. Joining me today, I have...
My name is Ernesto Ramirez. I'm a faculty member with Mexican American Studies. I've been here on this campus in one capacity or another as student, staff, or faculty since 1995.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been some time.
So you know the campus well.
Yeah, I've seen it grow and I've seen it develop from a campus of around 14,000 students up to where we are now with 28,000 plus.
Yeah. I've invited, and Ernesto's being, I think, a little humble, I've invited Dr. Ramirez here to talk about an issue that has actually come up in previous podcasts, imposter syndrome. And so I thought, given Ernesto's research background and his knowledge of the campus, his extensive knowledge of our students and our student body, I thought he'd be a perfect guest to talk about this issue. And so, Ernesto, tell our listeners, in a few words, what exactly is imposter syndrome?
Well, what happens is you have an internal feeling, that you just do not belong in the situation where you find yourself. In the sense of academics, it is individuals at an institution, whether it be students or even faculty, feeling that they're just waiting to be found out. They're waiting to be caught, that maybe I do not belong here. And it's not always a sense of that I don't have the ability to do the work that I'm here doing. Yeah. But just that maybe I'm not the right fit. That's always a possibility. Or that I got here by luck, not by my own graces, by my own hard work. And we've all experienced this before, where you know that you are capable of doing the work, but you're wondering, why did I get the chance to be here to do it? Yeah. Yeah. In a general sense, that is the syndrome that we're talking about. So
I'm going to ask you, from personal experience, as you said, you've been here in some capacity or a student faculty member. Have you ever experienced imposter syndrome?
Number of times, yes. Starting off first as a student. I'll remember my first experience as a graduate student. I was a graduate student in criminal justice. And this feeling of not belonging here in this particular situation started with my very first class in the very first semester, where I was very capable of doing the reading, I was very capable of doing the writing, but looking around the room at the other 4 to 6 people that were in these classes with me and recognizing their own abilities, I started to wonder, why am I here amongst them? Yeah. Yeah, and so I felt this imposter syndrome. I felt like I was just waiting for the shoe to fall, and everybody's going to discover that I didn't belong in the room with them. Yeah. But it worked its way through. It worked its way through one through time. But the unfortunate incident around all of it is that you suffer in silence. It's not something you go and you talk to the person sitting in class with you and say, "Hey, you belong, but I don't." Yeah. Why is that?
And so you said it sorts itself out, over time. What happened? Did anything happen along the way that kind of reminded you that like you deserve to be here, or because time is one thing, but I imagine whether it's the coursework, whether it's the conversations you have in class, I imagine there are things that can maybe reaffirm the imposter syndrome, or maybe change your attitude a little bit, or remind you that you do belong here. Did anything in particular happen that changed your view?
I'd have to say that it was a supportive family, really. One of the things that we happen to know about imposter syndrome, you look at studies through psychology, is that this is something that impacts people who are high achievers. They're doing very well. And when you look at the cultural breakdowns, you tend to find that it is amongst individuals who come from a cultural background where there is an extreme, sense of pressure on the achievement, and not necessarily an extreme pressure to share your concerns, where imposter syndrome is the strongest. One of the great things about being who we are, Hispanic or Latino, Mexicano, however you want to term, your own identity as a part of our culture, is that we have a really good family connection. And so it wasn't in the classroom where I received the sort of support that I needed to get over this imposter feeling, but it was through discussions with my own father. Yeah, and my father having, I'm going to say, the courage to share, he had some of those exact same misgivings as he went through college.
Yeah.
As he worked through his own, graduate program. And so having these conversations with him on a weekly basis, which is something we still do today, I was able to get over the fact that, yes, I don't feel like I belong here, but yes, I do belong here.
Yeah.
And so it was really family. It was father that helped with this.
Now, I know your father's story. Your father, military veteran, correct?
That's correct.
A longtime educator.
That's right.
Also has a doctorate, a number of degrees. And so for you, it sounds like a tremendous resource, having an individual like that you can go to. You can share your maybe your insecurities or your concerns, that self-doubt that maybe you have. A lot of our students don't have that, or at least they don't have, maybe, especially if I think of our first generation students, right? And so they're the first in their family to go to college. The institution feels and sometimes I think looks like a foreign land to them.
Right.
What advice do you have for them? Or and maybe even now as an educator, and you have a lot of these students, what do you tell them? How do you encourage them?
So it starts off from my own position professionally as the faculty member to talk about these kinds of things that are going on around us. Mm-hmm. I do mention it in class. In some cases, I'm very fortunate because of the content material that I teach. I teach the psychological issues in Mexican American communities. Hence, it leads itself to this naturally. Yeah. But also in my introduction to Mexican American studies, we talk about these issues. Thankfully, when I was teaching Learning Framework, I had that opportunity to do it there as well. But what I suggest to our students is to develop a relationship with faculty and staff here at the university. Mm-hmm. When you have that opportunity to share these concerns with somebody who has maybe gotten to a position that you want to get to or that you aspire to, mm-hmm. or you feel has made it in our society, then when you have that relationship, you can break down those barriers that say, I can't talk about these issues. Yeah. And it affords you that opportunity to actually get in there, have that discussion with them, and to normalize this behavior or this feeling. And that's probably the greatest sense right there, is once you feel that it's normal, then it's something you can deal with. As long as it's something that needs to be dealt with in private, mm-hmm. as an issue, maybe a feeling of guilt or shame, mm-hmm. then we never get it out there. We never have those conversations. Yeah.
Do you think it's important that students know that they're not alone?
Most definitely. Again, this imposter syndrome is something we suffer with in silence. Mm-hmm. And I want students to know, I want everybody to know, this is normal. This is something that we all tend to go through, maybe in various degrees, some people more than others, but at one point or another, we find ourselves sitting in a meeting, or we find ourselves sitting in a classroom teaching, or in a classroom learning, or maybe it's that first job that we get, it's a part of our career line that we've waited all our lives to get to. And it's sort of like, man, I don't belong here. Yeah. It's going to happen sooner or later. Yeah. And if you get that out, if you recognize that it's not something to be done in private, but it's something to be shared in public, there's going to be somebody out there who's got a wealth of knowledge and information and experience who can share with you their own struggles through that and show you, you're on the right path. Yeah. Just the fact that you're questioning, I tell my students, shows that you're on the right path. Yeah. Yeah.
Do your students, because you engage in these conversations, right, and you encourage them to share what they're experiencing or how they're feeling, what do you hear back from them? Do they say, or do they feel like there are a lot of spaces on campus where they can share, where they can... Because I think you're right? It's something we suffer with in silence, and sometimes the last thing we want to do is to tell anybody, I don't know that I belong here, or right? If we're trying to prevent, as you said, the shoe from dropping, mm-hmm. I don't know that we want to immediately go on and advertise it to the world. So for our students and the conversations you have, do they feel like there are a lot of those safe spaces where they can share those feelings?
I would say that right now, what I've heard from my students is not that there are several locations or several mm-hmm. places within their experience where they can do this, but that the spaces that they do have are very rich and open and allow for these conversations to occur. And so these occur through student organizations for some.
Mm-hmm.
It occurs through the classroom, okay, especially when they get a faculty member like myself or yourself who are willing to bring these up in the formal classroom setting, which then allows them to then bring it to an informal, but also in those experiences where they have developed a relationship with their faculty members or their staff members, and you meet with your students. I've done the same thing, I've had lines of students outside the hallway waiting to meet with me on appointments.
Yeah.
And those become the spaces where they can sit down, they can share, and they can open up and have that conversation. And when we do it earlier on in the semester rather than later on in the semester, you find them coming back, to repeat these experiences and stories and to tell you, how things are going for them, how it's developing, evolving, and how they're feeling better about certain things. And then when you have that opportunity to follow them from semester to semester to semester, and you see them 3, 4, 5, 6 semesters, you see them at graduation, and they're telling you how, remember the first semester I'm going to graduate school now, I can't wait,
Yeah.
And that's wonderful. So those spaces do exist.
Yeah.
But it requires, I'm going to say, more effort from us, to develop more spaces for them.
From us meaning the institution, from us meaning faculty?
I'm meaning the institution. I mean, as faculty, we're just like our students. We're limited in time. Mm-hmm. We're limited in that resource. And I think those of us who are interested in making this happen are already trying to do this as much as possible. I don't run into many faculty who do this kind of thing who say, I've got like another 40 hours, and I should be using it,
Yeah.
So I think it's an institutional effort at this point.
So if we could imagine what that would look like, what would you like to see? What kind of institutional commitment would you like to see? That at least where we feel like there are more of those spaces where those rich conversations can occur, where students can ask and reflect openly without fear about their sense of belonging here at the university.
I think it starts with maybe a series of professional development sessions for our faculty.
Okay.
Those who have this continuous relationship with students through their programs. And I think this professional development looks a little bit more like humanizing education. We all know our topic material. Mm-hmm. We have a series of degrees that tells us this.
Yeah.
We all have the experience of learning. Again, through the formal educational structure, we have a series of degrees that show this. And many of us have developed the methods of teaching our subject material. Now, whether that was trial and error and things worked out great, or there was an opportunity to get some professional development in that and it's worked for us, that's great. Mm-hmm. But we don't have anything around us through our doctoral programs usually, or in professional development at the institution that says, this is how you relate as a person to your student.
Yeah.
And I think we need that. So you look at Mexican American studies, or you look at educational studies, you look at psychological studies, and you look at the impact of humanizing the experience between people of various levels of power, mm-hmm. And breaking down those barriers of power to show that we're all people, humans, you find that the relationships are enriched. Okay. So when we think about teaching and we think about going out on an edge and saying, look, I'm just as vulnerable as you are. And yes, I understand there's a power differential here. I have a degree. I'm the head of the class, but I'm a person. And I need to sit down and I need to connect with you as a person. Mm-hmm. And I'm still going to hold you to the standard of the academics. I'm still going to expect you to learn and read and struggle on growing as a student.
Yeah.
But I want you to know that you can come talk to me as a person. I think that's what our institution needs to focus on.
Yeah.
In order to get to that level. Now, whether we build centers out of this, or we actually build physical spaces where we allow for these kinds of interactions to occur, I don't know if that's really necessary.
Yeah.
I'll meet with a student at a coffee shop here on campus. I'll meet with a student for lunch if that's what they want. I meet with the students most often in the center where I work, from the Center for Mexican American Studies. So I try to meet with students in their spaces, not my own space.
Yeah.
But again, I think it comes down to that humanizing aspect.
Yeah.
Laura Rendon's work, where she talks about having a love for your students.
Yeah.
I think that creates that opportunity for students to get beyond those fears and to understand that what I'm feeling, this imposter syndrome, my faculty member experienced it maybe not in the same way I did, but in these other areas.
Yeah.
But it really comes down to that loving your student and having that courage to say, hey, I'm just as vulnerable as you are.
That's powerful. Yeah, that's powerful stuff. Do you talk to faculty about this? I mean, is this a conversation? No, I know I've known you for quite some time, and we've had those conversations, and I think pedagogically, I think we share a lot of similarities. We have these relationships with our students. But I remember even within the Learning Framework program, early on, it was difficult to have those conversations with our colleagues.
Yeah.
Have you found it difficult to have those conversations with some of your other colleagues?
I have in a number of locations. I would say when I started out in criminal justice, again, it was suffer in silence. It was these were my thoughts, these were my experiences, and yet working with my colleagues who are established in that program, it's like, you don't go in that direction. This is how you teach at a university, and this is what you do.
Yeah.
So the conversations were difficult there. Moving on into UNIV Learning Framework, again, it was sort of like established individuals, this is how we need to do things, and we're doing this. And it was never about, we want to stifle our students. It was always about, we're trying to do what's best for our students. Mm-hmm. But it was about believing that this one avenue was the only best way to help our students. And so, those conversations have been very difficult. I have found them easier in interdisciplinary spaces, such as with Mexican American Studies, where we happen to have faculty who are coming to us from philosophy and history, literature. Mm-hmm. And part of it is that they're feeling stifled within their own disciplinary areas, and they're looking for other means by which they can connect with students. And so when they come to this space, they are already open to the conversation. Maybe not in particular what I have to say, but the fact is they are open to dialogue. And so it's become easier there. And I'd say in gender and women's studies program, it'd be the same thing, where I just joined now as an affiliate this year, that you have groups of people here who are willing to have conversations about topics, and they may not necessarily feel the same way you feel, but they're willing to listen and have that dialogue. But again, within the disciplines, it's a very difficult thing to have. And again, that's us, that's the institution, that's our fault. We graduate through doctoral programs which are very narrow and focused. And again, it's about how to do research within our particular disciplines rather than how do I connect with my students. So, I mean, there's some issues to be had here, dialogue about, how do we teach doctoral students who are becoming the next generation of faculty? How do we provide faculty development? Mm-hmm. How do we incorporate faculty and staff as one body? We typically have separations between the two. Even though we're obviously after the same task, and that is to help our students. None of this comes through very well for us. But we need to figure out what the institution needs to do in order to make these things continue to happen in the future. Because if we don't, we will end up losing our students in a number of ways. I mean, obviously we'll graduate them through the system, but we will never connect with them as people. And that can have an impact for us as far as maybe later on when we start talking about enrollments for master's programs, doctoral programs, especially when a student finds out how much time they have to commit to getting these kinds of degrees. And it's sort of like, wait a minute, I have to be with you, but I really don't even feel comfortable talking with you. If
I have no connection with you, right? I have no relationship with you. But I think that's a critical point, right? If we want to grow, especially some of our undergraduate programs and definitely our graduate programs, right? It's much easier when we have connections with our students, and students feel safe coming to us, sharing their concerns, sharing their aspirations. I think what you've said again is incredibly powerful, and I hope that maybe this is the beginning of a larger dialogue about how we serve our students, and about creating those spaces where they can share their concerns, they can share a lot of times insecurities. I know one of the podcasts we recorded a few months ago, we had two first semester students, and both of them, one of them had a successful semester, the other not as successful, or not as successful as the young man had hoped for. But neither one of them said they felt like they belonged, for a number of reasons. And so I don't think those instances are few and far between. I think there are a lot of students that feel like that, and I'm sure you can attest to that. And so I think creating that space for that dialogue becomes incredibly critical as we look to grow the university. Wow. I don't know. Any final thoughts?
But I think we need to include our students in more of what we do as an institution. I mean, yes, we serve them, and yes, we have organizations for them, and obviously we have an entire division of academic affairs that serves students' needs. But what I mean is, we make decisions all the time about curriculum. We make decisions about pedagogy. How are we going to interact in our class and provide information and share information and learn from each other? But we don't often bring them in to say, what do you think about how we should design the syllabus?
Yeah, no, we don't.
We don't bring them in for these kinds of discussions, and yet that has a major impact on them.
Yeah.
We don't tend to ask students, did you learn what you wanted to learn?
Yeah.
And yet we believe satisfied at the end of the 4-year program because they've obtained their degree with us and they've moved on. I think if we want to really move beyond, I'm going to say, providing a service to a student and servicing students, we need to bring them into more of our decision-making processes. And I think when that happens, we'll get less students feeling that they don't belong in the system, because it truly will be representing what they need and want.
Well said. Wow, thank you.
Thank you.
So, this concludes this episode of the First Year Experience podcast. Please visit us on SoundCloud and iTunes, and tune in for our next episode. Thanks. Bye-bye.